Hello, everybody, and welcome to Greet the Week. This is Jan Moray, and I have my co-host Mona Duncan here, who's going to talk to us about what's the difference and conflict. So, what are you thinking about, Mona?
Well, I'm just looking at the fact that difference, as with most things, is a positive and a negative, or at least we can make it that way. That, it's different because it's not the way I wanted. It's not the way I thought it was going to be. It's different. And yet difference is, sometimes if we're just really bored and all that, we got to do something different.
Yes.
Or if things aren't going so well, we need to do something different. And then also, we all are so unique. We have this wonderful individualness. I mean, even with our fingerprints, they're alike, but they're not alike, and they can identify us. And we want something different about us. So, whenever they say Jan, this Jan we're talking about, that Jan Moray. There's a difference there. And so that difference is both compelling, but it's also dividing.
Yeah.
And so how that we can look at us and see how that we can be willing to be more all-inclusive.
With those people who think differently than we do.
Right. And maybe we are being excluded with those that think differently from us because there's just something there that we're missing. And to be at least open to it, to consider it, just to consider it, so that we can bring our differences together. And
it does get uncomfortable when you're around people who think a little differently from you. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just an uncomfortable feeling. And a lot of us don't feel right with that uncomfortable feeling.
Right. And then also to thinking about, sometimes if we can understand the reasoning behind where they're coming with that thinking, that maybe not. And maybe it doesn't need to be explored because that person is a unique individual, and all of these unique individuals in life matter.
They do.
They just matter. And so with this being Martin Luther King Day and the celebrating of Dr. King, some of my favorite quotes come from him. And I have a couple here that I wanted to share just starting off. And Dr. King said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that.
Mm.
And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And that love is the only force that is capable of transforming an enemy into a friend."
Right.
And by the same token, love is the only thing capable of transforming my negative attitude into one that's more accepting.
But then how do we deal with people who are negative towards us and who are saying things that we don't agree with?
Well, a wonderful word of wisdom came from a new recruit on the Baylor basketball team. They were on the in the qualifying for the positions and so forth. And she said that whenever, somebody comes at her, whether it's the coach or another fellow teammate or whatever, that her goal is to listen to the message, not the tone of voice.
Okay. That's hard to do.
It is hard to do, but we can program ourselves to do that.
We can, yes.
But we have to pay attention with intention to learning something, with intention to thinking, well, if I heard that, I'm hearing it, it may have been firm, but I'm hearing it, yeah. Mm-hmm. And if I would just, not shoot the messenger.
Right.
Not be angry with the messenger, but just listen to what the message is and be willing to consider it, to see if there's any validity to it. And the fact of the matter is to consider the fact that there may be validity to it, even though I'm willing to just continually exit off.
Right.
I mean, have you ever just had some advice given you disavowed it, pushed it aside, was not willing to consider it whatsoever until we was painted in a corner and was okay.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And as I surrender, you're right, you really are right. I don't like to admit it, but you really are right.
Right.
And sometimes that's the greatest lessons that we can ever learn.
It really is. And that's the thing, when somebody tells you no, or somebody tells you that that's a stupid idea, you don't want to hear that. This is what I believe, that this is the way it needs to be. And if I listen to what you say and do what you say, I'm never going to know if what I thought was right is really right until I try it. And so then I try it and I paint myself in a corner, and then I go, okay, maybe I should have listened. At least then I'm in more of a place to be receptive to that advice and to do it that way.
And even though you painted yourself into a corner, you didn't paint yourself into the corner without having learned something before you got there where you couldn't get back out until the paint dried.
I have another option I can try.
Right. And sometimes that other option is, okay, now I'm willing to hear what you had to say.
But yes.
Not that I'm going to embrace everything you have to say.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Edgar Guest. Somebody said it couldn't be done, and he, with a shrug, replied that maybe it couldn't, but he would be one who wouldn't say so till he tried.
Right.
So sometimes we have to prove our own self correct, and sometimes we have to prove our own self incorrect. And it's not necessarily that black and white, that plus and negative. It's not so much more that I wasn't as, there was still a lesson to be learned in all of that regardless. It's rarely, it's back to the fact that we talked about the quantum theory, the quantum science, that things change just by observing it.
Right.
And even though we get that information and we rejected it initially, just by that having to reconsider it again, that gives change to it. It gives liberty to it. It gives some elasticity there. So, and it's, I have a couple other quotes here from Martin Luther King. Love is the only force capable of, transforming an enemy into a friend. And he says, faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase.
Yeah, right. You believe that it's there.
Yeah.
And it's going to get you where you need to go.
And it's taking that first step, whether it is to keep my mouth shut this time, even when I really think I've got or if it's taking the first step to speak up, even though I was sounding like the mouse that roared because I'm, trembling inside and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes taking that first step. It's taking that first step of realizing that we live in such a big world, and there's so many different personality types and different aspects to everything, that it all apparently has validity to it somewhere, or it wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the accepting of that, accepting and realizing that acceptance doesn't mean approval.
Exactly. That's right. That is so important, because a lot of people really think that if I accept you, that means I'm approving what you're doing. And it's like, no, that doesn't mean that at all. It means that you're accepting me for who I am, but you don't necessarily have to agree with the way I'm going and what I'm doing.
Right.
But you're accepting that that's who I am, and that's just what I do.
So I have been rereading Dr. Glasser's Stations of the Mind.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yes, and I absolutely love it. I mean, I can see why he, in his Champion of Choice, or anytime, he would say, no, don't read that one, read my newer stuff. I can see that because, I can just see why he would say that. He goes into too much detail.
Well, I find it interesting that you said that, because it's when I read Champion of Choice that I found out about Stations of the Mind. And then
really?
He said he didn't want people to read it. I said, well, I'm going to read it.
Right, exactly.
Excuse me for a second.
Yes,
I missed a word.
Okay.
Something of the mind. What was that first word?
Stations.
Yeah.
Oh, stations.
Mhm.
Stations of the mind.
Stations?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, stations of the mind.
Okay.
And what it is he was equating it to his car analogy that he eventually came up with. He had,
Mhm.
in stations of the mind, he was just going through like a terminal and going to different stations and evaluating at each station. And the stations that he goes to starts off with intensity, meaning that, whatever it is that comes to us that we begin to look at, boy, it is so intense and I can't handle it,
Mhm.
that it's just overwhelming. And then we have to continually evaluate, go to another station and get some more input, and another station and get some more input, and so forth, until we keep on going up and going up. And I imagine it as, going up climbing a mountain, or going up the stories of going from level here down on the floor to going all the way up to the penthouse, where you can look out and see and understand the chaos that's going down there. Now, here's the first floor where there's all that chaos.
Right
and
in the middle of it.
right, and you're right in the middle of it. Yeah. You're not only observing it, you're a part of it.
Right.
And then we begin to go on up, with a little bit more levels where we can be observing of it, and we can be a part of the solution, but we're not yet a part of the answer, or we're trying to be, until we get all the way up to the 10th level, which is universal oneness, that we realize we all belong in here.
Mhm.
Because if we weren't, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
And that's real profound.
Yeah.
That is real profound. And that we all have a purpose in life. And that purpose is to be loving and kind. And it was also, all the way, we are programmed. We as human beings, all of the epigenetics and all the things we're programmed with compassion, to have compassion for others. That we are programmed to be touched by a baby's cry.
Mm-hmm.
That whenever we go down the road and there's a hobo standing on the street with this little sign, wanting food, wanting a quarter, that we are programmed to have compassion for them. And if we don't, we have to put up some kind of a firewall.
Right.
We have to put up some kind of a firewall that says, oh, well, they're hobo. They just don't want to work for a living. We have to put up something, because we are programmed for compassion. We are programmed to care. We are programmed to connect with others. We are programmed, and that everything we do is either to draw us closer together or to drive us further apart. And even just putting up those firewalls of finding their vulnerable parts, finding their flaws, so that I can't have any compassion for them. It's like it elevates us, but it really doesn't.
No, 'cause you don't feel right. Yeah.
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 And, it's like working with the prisoners. I would tell them, how do you know when you're not doing the right thing? Well, your body will tell you, first of all. And if you walk away from it and you don't feel good about it, that's your internal radar system saying, error. Back up, back this totally up.
If you keep doing that, then your warning system gets quieter and quieter, and so you're not hearing those warnings anymore.
It does. And back here to our 10-story, from going here from day up to go there, we can also continue to go down and dig those tunnels deeper. We can get down to go into the basement. We can get down to go into the sewer system. Well, that's going to take me out of here. I'm so clever.
That is a way to get out of there.
And there's a lot that do, live and go in that sewer system. But not only does it hurt the person there, it hurts the other people there, and it also hurts the people that are, going up to the penthouse, going up to understanding that oneness is, that we're all here for a purpose. And our timing is for a purpose, So if we didn't interact with each other, if we didn't talk, if we didn't share, if we didn't all this, there wouldn't be any conflict. But whoa.
But then how boring would this be?
I know. What's the purpose of that?
Yeah, right. I was one of those who was very conflict averse growing up, just because my father was just so strong that he did not allow us to disagree.
Oh,
You know.
right.
And so it was very difficult for me. But once I started facing conflict and standing up for myself, you start feeling good about yourself because you did it. You stood up for yourself. You didn't allow someone to tell you something that you didn't agree with or put you down or whatever it was. You were able to stand up for yourself. And that is very empowering, and to help you to continue to do that, and to realize that not all conflict is bad. And a lot of times you'll get that negative emotion with the conflict because you don't like it, but that doesn't mean it needs to go away and you can never talk to that person again, or you don't want to have anything to do with that person. It's, well, they're providing me some information and I can choose how to deal with it. But maybe we need to talk about it because they're coming from one perspective and I've got another perspective, and maybe we're just kind of missing the point. So I try to understand, where they're coming from. It won't be so painful.
Right. And then that as you do stand up for yourself and speak out, that gives you a new identity. I mean, you're aware that this is who I am, and hey, I didn't crumble and fall because I spoke up and was honest with who I am, or who I am right now. This is the way I'm seeing it right now, realizing the fact that there are still some nuances that I'm not seeing. And whenever they come up, I may want to, hide for a while.
Right.
Because I may not like what I'm seeing. But that's okay too, because that's a way for us to learn.
It is, and choose whether we want to do something about it or continue on.
Right. And if
I don't like it, but I know but I am comfortable with it, and that really is who I am. Or if I really can't live with it, then maybe I should do something.
Maybe I should do some transforming, or put it in a compartment that it's for emergency only. Because there are sometimes that adrenaline's for that emergency only.
Yes, it is.
To really get you out and to do something. And so so I thought, well, how can we kind of begin to do this? Is to not stay in the dark, but let some of the light come in. And one I'm thinking is to determine our own objectives in life, or our own purpose in life. What is it? Why am I on planet Earth? And what are my objectives? And is it domination, or is it a win-win? Is it a win-win? And so the challenged Olympics, I forget what they call them.
Oh, Special Olympics.
Yeah, the Special Olympics. Yeah, the Special Olympics. That this little boy, he was running and he was so excited and people was clapping and, yelling for him and everything. And he was going, and he turned around and he looked and his little friend was further behind him. And he went back and helped him.
Yeah.
And so he says, let's win together.
Let's win together. Yes, let's do win together.
Yeah. Let's win together. And so it's looking at my objectives, the way I see things, my perceptions, but which is more important, being right or relationship?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That really is.
Yeah.
And to go for well, I know I'm right on this, but you can see the look in the other person's face that they're not with you on it. So let's do this together. Let's win together. Let's
and also, what's more important, being right or having peace?
Right.
You can be right all along. And not only is it not relationship, but how peaceful is it?
Yeah.
Because we do have this comparing place in our mind. And it's, oh, well, how could I have done it better? You know, and maybe it could have been, how could I have been more off-putting? I find sometimes they're, in my perception, I think I know people like that want to be more off-putting.
What about a third possibility?
Okay, what is it? And there's probably more than three.
Well, the third that comes to my mind is both. Both. Too often, I find we think it's got to be either or, when the real answer is both.
Exactly, Jerry, exactly. It's both and.
Yeah.
It's both and. It's not either or. And sometimes that both and, you know, can go one direction, the other one go one direction. Oh, okay. Can have some kind of a meeting of the heart, if not a meeting of the mind. Can have a meeting of understanding and appreciating the conflict as well as the good. And then it's looking at ourselves and, you know, what's clouding my vision?
Mm-hmm.
What's clouding it? You know, what is it? What preconceived ideas do I have? What's been my perceptions? You know, is it my perception that the whole world is to be logical and orderly and just, and that justice is supposed to point in my direction?
Correct, because I know which is the right way, right?
I'm the center of the world, the center of the universe. Yeah. And what if that justice is, fine. What if that justice is, you know? And it can still be very, very just. Very, very just. And
because it may not seem just at the moment, but it's possible that later on it proves that it's the right way to go and the right thing to do. I mean, I think about raising children and some of the things that you try to get them to do. They don't want to. Like I can remember when we were kids, we were very structured, and we could only have snacks at a certain time of the day. And you know, that was so unfair because I wanted to be able to snack all day long, but we had these, you know, just a certain time. If you know, is it 3 o'clock? No, well, you can't snack yet. It's not time to snack. But that developed discipline within me, and I believe that discipline has really helped me throughout my life. And because I learned to wait, I learned that I didn't have to, you know, just because I wanted something, I didn't need to fulfill that need right at that moment.
exactly.
Because it wasn't time yet. And
Yeah.
it seems kind of silly. Well, why don't you let your kid have something to eat now? She's hungry. Well, because it's not time to have for snack time. But in the long run, it does develop a skill that is helpful down the road.
Right. My mom would say, "Oh, I don't think you want that."
Yeah. Oh, I always hated that. It's like, well, how do you know what I want? I do.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to try to prove it, and then we.
Right. That's right. You hear my stomach growling. I do want it right now.
Yeah. And in, you know, learning what's the difference and all that is just being willing to, again, accept what is. It is what it is. It is what it is. And it goes back to matter. You know, matter is what it is, and it can't be created and it can't be destroyed, but it can be changed. It can be modified, and it is what it is. And the more we observe it, quantum theory, it changes just by observing it. And it changes even more if we will choose to observe it with compassion and observe it with intention rather than with tension.
Mm-hmm.
And see how that that it can blend together so that it's not either or, but it's both and. We can all work together. And we can all begin to look at the different systems of values, and that all of them are important for varying situations.
Yeah, things do change. There's no one size fits all. You have to take into consideration, and there's no one thing causes something else. We're all part of a system, and it depends on the context. It depends on the people involved and what else is.
Right. And I'm thinking of the monetary system. I have someone coming to the basic intensive that's from Canada, and she was saying, well, how much would that be in? She said, how much would that? How much is that in Waco dollars, in Texas dollars? Yeah. And so I was giving her. She said, oh, okay. And anyway, we had a discussion there. And so it's a value system, but there are increments to it in different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But anywhere there's a discrepancy, righteous judgment will somewhere in there make up the difference. There's an equity there somewhere. We can't always see it. Sometimes, I have to pay more for this or I have to pay less for that. Oh, I get a real bargain when I go to this country, and I have more of a burden when I go to that country. But it's realizing that it's still an adventure. It's still something that is wonderful and purpose-driven, value-driven. So we're coming to the end of our time, getting close to.
Yeah. You have another quote to close us out?
I'm sure I can find one here somewhere.
Okay. I was just expecting you to already have one.
Yeah. No, I was just going to look at the fact that whenever we look at these things that frustrate us and anger us and whatever other emotions that come, and we have, the options of how we see them, and our heart breaks or we're, angry. The thing of it is that anger is not the first feeling we felt. There was fear there. There was fear, that what I'm wanting, what I'm doing, it's not going to happen. And so there's a fear there, and we don't want to accept that fear. We don't want to own up to that because, I ain't feared of nothing.
Right.
We kind of slide into anger. And anger is where we get that extra energy to show you, tell you, do you. But as we can look at that and we realize that sometimes we need to be taken down a peg or two, and it hurts, and we're devastated. It's just that whatever in life it is that breaks our heart, opens our heart. It opens our heart.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
You mentioned Glasser's work, Stations of the Mind.
Yeah.
Is that the name of a book or an essay or?
Yes.
What
The name of a book.
Okay. When did he write that? Do you know?
81.
Okay.
1981.
Okay.
When it was copywritten.
So that was before or after his control theory books?
Before.
Before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Stations of the Mind, and then I think it was Reality Therapy, and he wrote something else before Reality Therapy. Reality Therapy is what put him on the books, and he wrote Positive Addiction, Stations of the Mind, and I think it was then Control Theory. I think those were the first four that he.
Do you know why he changed the name from Control Theory?
Yes, I do.
Choice Theory?
Yes, because it was at a convention. It was at a Glasser convention. And someone made the comment to him that if the counselors counseling with control theory were taken to court because of a client that had, harmed themselves or harmed someone else or something, they would say, well, that counselor was teaching them to be controlling. And Dr. Glasser said, no, you're to control yourself, not someone else. And, and so then, and I don't know if the other person suggested choice or not, but he said, and I mean, from that moment on, it was changed. That he was going to look at the fact that we are controlling ourselves by the choices that we make.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. Okay.
Yeah. But that's when and where. And I'm thinking it was.
What year was that?
Oh.
Well, I'll have to look that up.
It might be in Champion of Choice. If you go back and look at his biography, it might be in
Right. Well, actually, yeah.
Well, we're out of time for now. We'll continue this discussion afterwards. But thanks everybody for joining, and we will see you again next week for another edition of Greet the Week.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.